a shocking selection from the Dutch Olympic Committee.
A convicted child rapist is competing this year.
A Dutch volleyball player who raped a 12-year-old British girl.
How a man convicted of raping a 12-year-old is allowed to represent the Netherlands.
We realized after we got in how much it meant to us, and we're just super excited.
Well, there are a number of reasons people feel outraged watching the Olympics in Paris. Chief among them for many is that a convicted child rapist, Steven van der Velde, is competing. The 29-year-old plays beach volleyball for the Netherlands. In fact, he's one of the best players in the world. Today on the Nexus, we'll be asking who decided he could compete, and we'll be asking why he's not still in prison. Judging by appearances alone, Steven van der Velde looks like a normal young man, excited about competing at his first Olympic Games.
Like, it's in Paris, close to home. What you said, our first Olympics, so it's sort of a childhood dream come true.
But van der Velde has a dark backstory. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to raping a 12-year-old child. He was 19 at the time. He'd flown from his home in the Netherlands to the UK to meet a British girl he'd been messaging over Facebook. Sentencing van der Velde to 4 years in prison, the British judge said, "Your hopes of representing your country as an Olympic athlete now lie as a shattered dream." Van der Velde knew his victim was just 12 years old and has apologised for raping her, but he still tries to justify himself.
Je mag oordelen, tuurlijk. Ik bedoel, weet je, het is de grootste fout van mijn leven en het is ook een gigantische fout. Niemand zal het ontkennen.
8 years after a judge said his Olympic dreams had been shattered, van der Velde is in Paris, living his dream, although some remember what he did. Van der Velde was booed and cheered when his name was announced at his first game on Sunday. And so Team Netherlands allowed him to skip the press conference after the game in order to protect him. "We are protecting a convicted child rapist, yes," said the team spokesman, to do his sport as best as possible at a tournament he qualified for. Team Netherlands is certainly shielding van der Velde, but does he deserve such clemency and consideration? During the trial, his young victim told the court how she'd taken an overdose and had self-harmed. Van der Velde's life, though, is going pretty well. He's competing at the highest level and is married to a volleyball player. Together they have a 2-year-old son, but his past does still haunt him. While he's allowed in the Olympic Village, he is isolated from the larger Dutch team. The International Olympic Committee isn't exactly thrilled to have him there, but accepts it's the decision of the Netherlands.
Can we take this to mean that you're comfortable and happy with the idea of a convicted rapist taking part in your Olympics? Thank you.
No, I think to characterise it as comfortable and happy would not be correct. I think this crime occurred some time ago, 10 years ago. There's a great deal of rehabilitation has taken place, and there's very strong safeguarding in place also.
Well, the Dutch are clearly fine with van der Velde competing, but not all the teams agree. Here are the Australians.
If an athlete or a staff member had that conviction, they wouldn't be allowed to be a member of our team. Where we have very stringent policies around safeguarding within our team, and we have full confidences in those policies and the training that we've put our staff and athletes through to have awareness.
Well, we spoke to someone who was abused as a young girl and who now runs a charity to help children. Emma Jane Taylor told us why, in her opinion, van der Velde should not be competing.
It is naturally upsetting because of so many things, but most importantly, the victim is rarely considered. He will be going for gold, and that's the rub. He took a child's life when he raped her. She was just 12. It's sickening to think that his life continues in the public eye. Van der Velde is not a good role model. He's not someone for children to look up to, especially boys. Boys should not believe this is the right way for them to treat girls and then go on to become a hero. And I believe he should still be in prison. He should be nowhere near the Olympics around anybody, because that simply greenlights a very dangerous conversation longer term.
Well, the Dutch, they say they've taken measures to ensure everyone's safety, including housing van der Velde outside the Olympic Village. But some athletes feel it shouldn't just be left up to the Dutch. Mhairi Maclennan was the fastest British woman at the London Marathon this year, and she told us there should be consistent international standards.
the way the sport currently is run is independently regulated. So each country and each sport are responsible for setting their own rules and for ensuring that they comply with their own rules. So the IOC doesn't have a role. There is no independent regulator to set standards. What we are stating as an organisation in terms of Kiniska advocacy standpoint is that there should be international standards for cases where there are convicted criminals taking part in competitions that are on a global or international stage, such as the Olympics. And we believe that there are certain crimes whereby if you commit them, you should not be afforded the privilege of competing on an international stage, such as at the Olympics. When an athlete represents their country at the Olympics, they are pivoted and catapulted onto a global stage. There will be millions, if not hundreds of millions of people watching them around the world, including very young children. And these people will be heralded as heroines, heroes, and idols. And to be on an Olympic stage is to implicitly suggest that you embody the Olympic values, one of which is respect. And we ultimately believe that it is an impossibility to say that you can uphold those values if you have raped a child, regardless of what age you do that at.
Well, here in Britain, where the girl was raped, it seems most people we spoke to share those concerns.
He broke the law.
A rapist? Oh yeah, I wouldn't let him compete in the Olympics. That was me, no way.
Do you think he should be in the Olympics?
I don't know. I don't know the full facts, but perhaps not.
We may have already been convicted, but because on an international stage, it looks bad.
What do you make of that?
Disgusting. He was in prison, I think, yeah.
He served his time?
Yeah. Second chance, huh?
Definitely shouldn't be allowed to play.
Now, you'd think if a man is found guilty of raping a child, he'd be given an appropriately harsh sentence. But here in Britain, he was sentenced to just 4 years in prison. And when he went home to the Netherlands to serve his sentence, the Dutch courts downgraded the offence, and he spent just 13 months behind bars in total. So why did the Dutch reduce his sentence? We put that question to Dutch lawyer Peter Schouten.
So in the Netherlands, we have a law that Dutch citizens can be transferred to the Netherlands to execute their sentence there. And if that's the case, then they fall under the Dutch execution terms. And in 2016, because now the law has changed, then it counts that they only have to do 2/3 of their sentence. His sentence was 48 months, so that's 32 months. And then, of course, there is also what is called the phasing of detention. So people can re-socialize, and that can happen in the last 18 months of their sentence. So in his case, that was totally utilized, and then you come to 13 to 14 months. I think it was 14 months, but he had, of course, probably 1 month that was compensated because of temporarily custody. As I understand it, and have read a lot about it, it was so that there was first consent. If there is consent, you still cannot have sex, so sexually penetrate a girl between 12 and 16. That is still not allowed in the Netherlands, but you will get more punishment when there is any force used. Or when you, for instance, the girl was vulnerable for certain reasons, or you had a certain power position over that person because you are her coach or her teacher. Now, that was all not the case.
Of course, some people are asking, why doesn't France prohibit child rapists from entering the country? They do in America. Here's a French and American lawyer explaining the difference.
I think if this athlete has served in his sentence, and the courts have not banned him from participating in sporting events as a supplement to the sentence, to his sentence, he can perfectly well participate in the Olympic Games in France. Nobody can say you can't come in France or you can't participate to the game. It's the end. The criminal case is closed. and there's no juridical problem on his participation.
Whether Steven van de Velde would have been allowed into the United States is a complicated one. I will say probably not. Under normal circumstances, there's no way a person who's been convicted of what he's been convicted of generally be granted a visa. There's almost no chance of that to come to the United States. So the answer to the question of whether if he were American, would he have been allowed to compete in the Olympics or for the U.S. Olympic team? The answer is no. There's no way that an American squad would have included him on their team.
Well, not only does the French government permit a child rapist to compete at the Olympics, it also allows millions of dollars to be spent on an opening ceremony that has upset and offended people around the world. Once every 4 years, the world tunes in to watch the Olympics. Families gather on sofas in eager anticipation as the host city puts on a spectacular opening ceremony.
Bonsoir, bienvenue à Paris.
They've always been wholesome, family-friendly viewing, at least they were until now. The Paris show was full of men, women and some other strange creatures gyrating obscenely and striking lewd poses, all in close proximity to little children who ought to be protected from such depravity. On top of all the debauchery on show, the ceremony appeared to mock Christianity, perhaps most obviously with this grotesque pastiche of the Last Supper.
What were they thinking?
Woke festival that seemingly pushed the trans agenda and mocked Christianity.
I thought that the opening ceremony was a disgrace, actually. I thought it was a disgrace.
The BBC reported that the ceremony wowed the crowd. As if coordinated, other broadcasters also used the word wow. 46-year-old President Macron and his 70-year-old wife Brigitte seemed to enjoy it. "This is France," he tweeted. But the vast number of complaints online forced a half-hearted apology from the organisers.
Clearly, there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group.
Notre intention n'a jamais été d'être impertinent ou d'être subversif, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure. Notre idée, c'est simplement que oui, dans cette grande diversité, il y a besoin d'être conjointement. Nous avons en tout cas voulu nous conjointement inclure tout le monde. Voilà.
To some, that was more like, sorry if you were offended, but you're just too much of a Philistine to understand our work. The organisers claimed this was a reference to Dionysus and the feasts of ancient Greece, but it's hard to believe they were not aware of its close resemblance to Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. In fact, some of the producers are now admitting it is a direct reference to the Last Supper.
This is everything wholly about Christianity, and we say absolutely nothing about it and say, oh, you cannot even complain. What are we doing wrong by saying that this is disgusting? This is not art.
Some critics online point to the sinister imagery as evidence that the ceremony glorified Satan. 2 years ago, similar accusations were made about the Commonwealth Games in the UK. Were pagans worshipping the false deity Moloch? It very much looked like it. Even as a piece of art, the opening ceremony in Paris failed. Even the left-leaning Guardian newspaper called it a hostage to hubris and soaring ambition deflated by patchy delivery. It was such an embarrassing failure, the Olympics removed the ceremony from its website. Well, the BBC said the ceremony wowed the audience, but that's not exactly what our correspondent saw. Here's Tala Duman in Paris.
Now, last Friday's show left people reminiscing for the Olympic openers of old, where everything was at one place. Almost everyone at a stadium enjoyed the festivities. But no, the French just had to be special, and the opening ceremony was in some sense very special. Fans paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars for tickets to be right next to the River Seine to witness the first outside opener in Olympic history, but it literally rained on their parade. And if you weren't at the Eiffel Tower, the finish line, you didn't really know what was going on. Now, we were at the Pont de Sully, really close to the starting line, and with Olympic parades, you usually get more than a few minutes to cheer on your favorite athletes, right? But that wasn't the case, especially after the boats were sped along due to the rain. And like the fans, we, along with a lot of other journalists, were caught by the rain, and we didn't really enjoy what was going on.
Well, we're about to bring in two members of the Anglican clergy with somewhat different views, but first let's hear again from the public.
It is quite disrespectful. Like, you are displaying like it's a very sacred moment in Christianity, in like a very degenerate way. I think it's very disrespectful.
Just don't really think there's a point getting upset. People can do what they want to do. It's not that important. It's not that deep.
I didn't like it at all. No. Even if I am not Christian, okay?
Because it's offensive.
I against it at all. It should be a respect for all the religions.
Christians are quite upset that they were mocking the Last Supper.
Oh, fine. Mock it is fine.
Do you think that's appropriate?
It's not right.
You think it's not right?
Yeah.
Do you think it's appropriate family viewing?
Probably not, but it was in the evening, so that I've probably seen worse at that time of night.
It's a mockery. Yeah, personally.
It's not appropriate for family viewing?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let's bring in our guests now. And today we have Reverend Yemi Adedji, originally from Nigeria and now from Cambridgeshire, and Dr. Ian Paul, who is a member of the General Synod of the Church of England. Now, Yemi, I'd like to start with you because you have an interesting and original take on this. You actually think that Christianity can benefit from what happened at the Olympic ceremony.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the amazing opportunity that has been afforded us as Christians, simply because if you imagine 29 people watched the opening of the Olympic opening ceremony, and there's this parody which is disgusting of the Last Supper. And for us as believers, it gives us what an amazing opportunity to give the right narrative, because people will be asking questions. We are the one as Christians who are challenging that, why did this happen? But there are many people who are unaware of what's the Lord's Supper, what's all that all about. So it gives us the opportunity to evangelize. I don't think such opportunity has been opened to Christians to communicate the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ than we see right now.
Ian, is that opportunity worth it?
Well, it's a good opportunity, but why do we need to have people causing offence and trashing and mocking Christian belief in order to have the opportunity? There's no doubt that there was a deliberate attempt to cause mockery and cause offence. I noticed on your banner it says outrage. Well, we don't need to be outraged. We can be offended and we can respond to that in a different way, in a gracious way. But I was very struck by the fact that, for instance, Adam Peaty, when he missed out on his gold medal by 2/100ths of a second, rather than being stressed or disappointed about it, he said that it's his Christian faith which has now helped him to respond rightly to this, to be well motivated and to have a hope which is well beyond the Olympics. So we don't need these kind of offensive things in order to have opportunities to share the gospel.
Of course, Ian, the ceremony's designer, Thomas Jolly, has now said that it was not an allusion to the Last Supper. It was actually related to Greek mythology. Do you believe him?
Yes and no. On the one hand, it was clearly an allusion. There's a 17th century painting which is hanging in a museum in Dijon, and you can see the likenesses to that. But it seems to me that itself is a parody of the Last Supper. And in fact, a number of the organisers, some of the artists involved, if you had the app which gave you a guide to the whole display, it said quite explicitly this is a parody of the Last Supper. So there's been all sorts of evidence that this is the case. But having said that, this isn't the first time that Christians will have been mocked. This has been happening since the time of Jesus himself, and we've got documentation, for instance, from the 2nd and 3rd centuries where people are mocking Christian belief. So the question is, how do we respond to that? How do we respond to that with grace and forgiveness? There's a great 2nd century letter from Dionysius who says, these Christians, they're mocked, but they respond with grace. They are attacked, but actually they respond by serving and loving others. So that should be our response to this mockery. But let's not pretend it wasn't mockery. In fact, actually, the whole of the ceremony was about mocking all sorts of different things. We weren't the only ones. And in fact, many French people have been rather ashamed of this, that this kind of approach is just trashing all sorts of cultural icons for the sake of entertainment.
Yeah, President Erdogan, I understand, is planning to call, or already has done, call the Pope and discuss the in inverted commas, the offensive ceremony. I'm just wondering why more very high-profile Christians aren't coming out, the leaders of the church coming out and condemning the ceremony.
I think it is the right thing to do to condemn this ceremony. I naturally too will condemn it because it's disgusting to present that, especially for our faith and for those who want to believe in our Lord Jesus Christ, as the parody is absolute nonsense. But for me, I think as a leader and many other leaders, is what opportunities are there. Just like he has said, I'll just have to agree with him that Christianity has been mocked all along, and it's not going to be the last. But how do we seize this as an opportunity to communicate the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ? Within the time the Olympics, opening of the Olympics up now, I've had the opportunity to have conversation with two people who have no clue about what this whole thing is all about. And I've been able to pray with them and share the gospel with them. And I think we should all take a positive approach, because trying to take up the arms and fight and all of that, I don't think is the best. Though we will challenge it, but we must look at the opportunity it gives to us to re-engineer the gospel and create a new narrative for people who doesn't have a clue of what all this is all about. It is a great opportunity for us, to be honest.
Ian, I have heard some Christian preachers calling for Christians to boycott the Olympics and even to sabotage it if they're working on the project. Do you think that they should do either of those things?
No, I don't think that's necessary at all as a way to respond. I think one of the things we do need to do is to understand the sort of cultural moment that we're in. I mean, one of the sort of philosophical convictions behind this kind of art is that everything's up for mockery, everything can be deconstructed. And I think one of the other things the organizers are claiming is that the meaning of a piece of art or the meaning of a text isn't to do with the intention of the authors, but to do with the effect it has on people. Now, that's a really big question, and we need to explore that, because it's bringing chaos into communication, how we understand, for instance, crime. Is a hate crime something that is to do with the intention of the person, or is it how it's perceived? It's to do with our communication on social media. Do we take an offense at things regardless of the intention of the person? There's something really important to explore there. But I think there's a bigger question, which is how do we find satisfaction and how do we find freedom? It does seem to me very fascinating that the feast, this meal of the Last Supper, which is central to Christian belief, here is being displaced by, well, I think what the organisers described as a bacchanalian orgy. So I think we've got a big question for ourselves in culture, which is how do we find meaning and satisfaction for our lives? Okay. And I think what the Christian faith points to is that we find meaning as we give our lives up in service to others. We don't simply indulge our own desires.
Now, Ian and Yemi, do stay with us. We're just going to take another look at a different aspect of this story now, and Olympic organisers defend their production by claiming it supports diversity and inclusion. But that generosity doesn't extend to sincerely religious people. French law bans any so-called ostentatious religious symbols in official settings, including crucifixes, kippahs, turbans and the hijab. Now, it's an attempt to protect France's secular political system, but it does mean that French athletes cannot wear these symbols, but people from other countries can. For example, here's Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic wearing his crucifix. French athletes do not have the same freedoms, including Muslim women who want to wear the hijab. Earlier, we spoke to Elena Barr, who is a basketball player who is trying to convince France's Basketball Federation to allow the hijab.
A member of basketball would actually, Diaba Konate, represented France when she was in the youth 3-3 team, and she was the one who had the potential to be part of the French team. In the future, I would hope that the French Federation and the French government change their policies, because it's such a waste of talent. It's dream crushing to know that you can't represent your country, although you represented it when you were younger, just because of what you wear.
Back to our panel now. Ian, it's a tricky one for France. They want to protect their secular political system. But do you think they've got the balance right here?
No, I don't think they have. I think what they're trying to do is keep religion and culture separate. And they can't do that for two reasons. First of all, does that mean that we're not going to be able to show the England flag or the Union flag? Because all of those have got crosses embedded on them, and their origin is clearly in the Christian faith. But there's also a question about culture. Where do our values of respect for people, for a belief in égalité, French égalité, come from? In the West, there's no doubt that the roots of those are in the values of the Christian tradition, of the Christian faith, and the idea that God has created all people in his image. So I think they're trying to separate things which actually can't in the end be separated from one another.
Yemi, what's your opinion of it? France got it right or wrong?
I think they're absolutely wrong. I think it's political correctness that has gone too far. Wearing cross for me is part of my identity. It's my belief, it's my faith, it's my conviction. And to ask me to remove it is like derobing me from what makes me to be me, and that gives me conviction. Now, for the people that live in France, I think it's a different kettle of fish because of the secularism and trying to fit in everyone within the society that they are. It must be very hard, it must be very difficult for those who are Christian because they can't wear their crosses, and for the Muslims because they can't wear their hijab. I don't think it's the right thing to do, but who am I to correct the law that is established in a particular country? But I just hope that they will be able to look inwardly towards that and change it in future.
Yemi Adedji and Dr. Ian Paul, thank you both very much for your contributions to the Nexus today. Much appreciated. And thanks for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.